Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the World Class Championship Wrestling Review Series. We enter 1983, and we miss the first couple of weeks. I don't know if it didn't air or what exactly the deal is. There's also a couple of weeks missing in February. There's 48 episodes in 1983 out of 52 weeks, so there's 4 episodes that do not exist, at least on the network. I'm curious if they exist in other forms, but they do not exist on the network. Anyway, we start with the 15th of January, 1983, and I'm up through. I finished February, which all of those should be posted today. In any event, please like, subscribe, comment if you enjoy these, and all that good stuff. SmackDown will be up too. But already in 1983, things are shaping up to be a interesting year. Lots of new faces and lots of new beginnings. But, so we open with Brian Adias versus Buddy Roberts. Buddy Roberts, 1/3 of the Fabulous Freebirds. Perhaps the least celebrated of the Freebirds. I say least only because there are people that do not know much about Buddy, or he kind of gets forgotten in history. He reminds me a lot of an Eddie Gilbert type fellow in that he's very good in the ring, perhaps a lot better than people give him credit for, but unless you're a diehard wrestling fan, you may not know the name. Obviously, Adias just about to start his second year as a full-time pro, and he is taken to, I won't say carried to, he carries his own weight, but at the same time, certainly he is led to a decent match here. Really basic match. Lots of headlocks, and they're stalling, obviously, by Roberts. Roberts goes to the armbar. Really, it's a very basic, old-school, kind of Southern-ish style match in that Roberts tends to be more of the seller as opposed to the move doer, and he is really good at facial expressions, really good at getting heat, gaining heat, and all of that. I would say the match is somewhat even in the early stages, with Roberts kind of owning the second half a little bit. Hope spot for a sunset flip in the corner, which kind of catches people off guard a little bit. They do the run into the post spot as well, and they're given a good 7 to 8. I don't think they go 10 minutes, but I mean, they're given a good opening amount of time. Adias does stand and brawl with Buddy a bit, which is surprising with Buddy's experience level. When he breaks the match down, Buddy, does hit things like a backbreaker. He uses the second rope to gain leverage advantage, and will do just about anything to get the advantage when needed. He does end up taking the match, and he does that relatively handily. He's brawling around on the outside relatively simply, or not on the outside, but kind of uses that advantage where he can get it. But he does not end up winning the match. When I say taking the match, I'm talking about a little bit of kind of that dominating and looking as though he's going to win for the majority of the time, which, I mean, he should at that level of experience. And the official spends a lot of time trying to separate the two. Relatively new referee. He bails to the outside a lot. Again, that stalling tactic and kind of the struggle there. There is a time limit draw officially And that's kind of where that goes. We move on to, I mean, I'm going to say a really ugly um, Freebird's interview. They're in a house somewhere. They call it the Freebird's house. Who knows if it is or if it's a set or what it is. There's a pool table and a Southern heritage flag. You know, there's music in the background, which I'm assuming at the time was Freebird, which has been dubbed over on the network. Hayes and Gordy really don't answer any questions. Gordy talks about wanting to be the America's champion, but you can barely hear the interview over the music, so I don't know if that's sound leveling or if it didn't tape well the first time or what that looks like. Hayes really doesn't answer a lot of questions about Kerry or, you know, his involvement with the championship thing, which you would think, especially if they did miss 2 weeks of television, that they would go the way of answering that. They don't do it. Al Madrill and Michael Hayes is up next as your next actual match. Worse than you would expect, and I don't know if it's more that they just don't click or what that is. The match is relatively simple. Michael doing a lot of stalling. Michael going in the direction of trying to, you know, keep the match going slowly, and Madrill tries to get things going in a more amenable way. Michael will do anything from rake the eyes to, you know, try a low blow, try kicking a guy when he's down, use the ropes, use a choke, whatever he needs to do. But it's more, after you've seen Michael with so much charisma, this is probably where Michael lacks a little bit, in that if he's in there with somebody that's not either bumping all over the place for him or doing, you know, something that moves things forward, he kind of has a good bit of, like, I don't want to say lost, but there is a little bit of energy that's needed in the match that doesn't really occur. And then we move on to the end of the match, and it's just kind of flat. Michael does hit a beautiful pile driver, however, which leads to his gaining a victory, at least short term. We move, you know, and I mean, he's going right at Madrill, and he's choking and doing everything he can possibly do. But it's just, you know, then there's other people who come in. Jose Lothario comes in and brawls with him. Michael is at his best selling here. He is certainly a guy who, you know, gets things going, and Lothario is a guy who has enough of a, I guess, cachet with the fans, where him going in the direction of getting that advantage is a pretty big deal. Michael willing to kind of sidestep things and slow the match down, and it shows a level of interest that's there. But again, Lothario, as a guy who's older, might be able to get a match out of Michael, and he does in the following couple of weeks, but it's not there, and it is what it is. You know, the reality of getting a few kicks in and all of that. Then we move to Andre the Giant in an interview talking about the elimination match upcoming. Andre in a sport coat is just amazing to see. When you think about the size of that man and all that. 6-man elimination match, they really don't, they really just make it, you know, an over-the-top rope elimination, submission, which Andre cannot think of the word submission for this, and so there's that. It's kind of funny. He's like, "There's another way to win. How is it?" And they say submission, and so you've got basically a 6-way match with Andre the Giant, Bill Irwin, Terry Gordy, Bugsy McGraw, Michael Hayes is in it. No, Terry Gordy's in there. But again, it's interesting because what you end up with is Andre. Kerry Von Erich is also in there. I mean, it's a very basic match breakdown. Everybody's going their own way. Bundy is a couple of weeks away from being, a big deal because of the Devastation Incorporated founding. Andre is going at just about anybody he can get his hands on, as is to be expected. Eventually, you see the damage of the Freebirds and Von Erich thing continuing. Andre over in another corner beating on anybody, including but not limited to King Kong Bundy, who he at one point pulls up by the strap of his gear, and it's just amazing to see Andre just manhandle somebody. But there's a point where Bill Irwin, Terry Gordy, and King Kong Bundy are kind of teaming up, even though they don't have an official alliance, against Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant, in this matchup, uses a rear naked choke, for lack of a better term. He is laying down and trying to choke out Terry Gordy, which for 1982, number one, if Andre the Giant's trying to choke me, even if he's working, I'm a little scared. I don't want giant hands around my throat. And number two, it just struck me as odd to see that type of a spot from Andre in this environment. Terry Gordy and Bill Irwin and King Kong Bundy spend several minutes beating down the Giant. Oddly enough, they are able to get sympathy on the Giant. Bundy goes, I believe, through the middle rope, eventually does go over the top, but there's a miscue between Bundy and Gordy. Gordy shoulder tackles Bundy, so I'm imagining if they wanted to, they could go back to a Bundy and Gordy feud at some point. But again, all three guys beating on Andre for several minutes here. That's really the majority of the match. Gordy, though, is so competitive, reminds me almost of a Japanese Stan Hansen. If you're familiar with Hansen from the early 2000s, that's about the best you've got. Andre does get eliminated here, and that is a bit of a surprise. Andre goes outside of the ring, and I guess the referee assumes that he goes over the top. He doesn't look to in the contest itself. We're left with Bundy and Gordy. Bundy, kind of holding his own with Gordy, which is surprising only because Gordy is new to the promotion ostensibly. So Gordy, kind of handling him. And then we see Gordy drop-kicking Bundy over the top rope to win the whole thing. So it's obvious that the Freebirds are going in a really heavy direction. We will be back with more World Class momentarily, but until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment.